Welcome to Art Talk. It's where art and artists come together.
This is a show dedicated to art and the people that make it. It's brought to you, produced by the Valley Arts Council.
Welcome to Art Talk. I'm your host, Lynne Ann Schwarzenberg, and with me today is Steve DiRienzo. He's the Vice President of the Valley Arts Council, and he's also an amazing artist, illustrator, and teacher. How you doing today, Steve?
Doing well.
Good.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be the new host of the show.
And it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. So what do you think inspired you to become an artist?
I was always drawn to the visual side of things at an early age. I'm a very visual person, and as a kid I always loved comics and comic books and cartoons and the Sunday funnies, and I was always drawn to picture books, illustrated books, always fascinated me, and any paintings that I saw just always kind of grabbed me. So I just started naturally gravitating towards drawing as opposed to much of anything else. My notebooks were littered with sketches and doodles as a kid, so the typical beginnings.
All right. And I know you're also a teacher.
I am.
And where is it that you teach?
I teach at St. Michael's School in Derby. I'll be working on my 7th year there, and I'm the full-time art teacher for grades K through 8.
Wow.
And I love every minute of it.
That's quite a range of ages.
It is.
Is it challenging?
It is. It is sometimes, but it's very satisfying as well.
That's
because
great.
the kids are phenomenal. And my principal, Mrs. Grace Torres, is very supportive of the arts, and pretty much, the sky's the limit with a lot of the stuff that I like to do and I like to bring into the fold.
Right, that's great.
Which helps really.
I know you also teach adults.
I do. I teach at the Art Studio of Connecticut up in Southington. I do night classes, and I also do our local adult ed a couple times a year. So it's a pretty broad range.
That's great. It must be really rewarding to teach something that you love.
Absolutely. Again, the biggest satisfaction is seeing people's reactions as to what they do and as they learn, and their pride in the finished product.
Right.
That's the best part for me.
Right, being a teacher, I understand
Yeah, exactly.
that too.
You know exactly where I'm coming from.
Yeah. And how did you get involved with the Valley Arts Council?
Interesting story. It was probably about 12 years ago or so, the guitar teacher that I was working with at the time, I'm also a big music junkie.
So you're not all visual.
I'm not all visual, a little bit,
right.
yeah, exactly. The guitar teacher I had at the time was based in Naugatuck, and he was a member of the Naugatuck Arts Commission, who was predominantly musicians at that point. And he said to me once, he said, "Did you know they're opening a gallery in downtown Derby?" And I had no idea. Apparently there was a newspaper article about it. So I learned about the Valley Arts Council, who apparently had been in existence for quite a long time prior to my getting involved. I went down to the gallery, I met Rich, I became a member, and about 2 years later he asked me to be his vice president, for his presidency. And 10 years later, we're still going strong.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's really great. Are there any other art projects that you're working on now?
I just completed, the end of this past school year, I just completed a mural at Ansonia, Ansonia's Mead School
Oh, okay.
as part of a grant project. And I'm currently working on one at St. Mary's at my school. And then I freelance as a graphic designer, and I do a lot of website work as well. So I'm pretty much all over the place, all over the map.
Speaking of being all over the map, I have a question about advice for artists that really want to make it as a living.
If I had to give advice for people to take to heart, it's don't give up, stick with it. And the secret, at least that I found in the end for me, is multiple income streams. If you can create on a multiple tier level and keep those profits coming in from all sides, then you can easily make a living. And there's a lot of ways, different ways to go within the industry itself. It's not all about just the arts. I mean, there's other aspects of the business that can be obtained. So you just stick with it. That's all I can just really say. Stay focused, don't give up on it, and don't listen to the naysayers. There's a lot
Be
of
a
them out there.
Renaissance man.
Be a Renaissance
Right.
person. Yes, exactly.
You got me on that one.
So,
You have any stories you'd like to share with the audience? Anything?
not really.
particular?
You know, I've kind of seen it all within the industry, and one thing that always surprises me a little bit. Actually, two things. Not really stories, but it's I call it a large industry, but a small industry, because it seems like and I know a lot of artists. I have a lot of peers, both
Sure.
visual artists and graphic designers and musicians and what have you. In some odd way, they all seem to know each other on some level. So I'll be talking to someone I worked with 10 years ago who just happens to know an artist that I work now with through the Arts Council, or a friend acquaintance that I have within the arts community. So I always found that fascinating, that it's a large community, but it's a very close-knit and small community. And I have to say, I'm my happiest when I'm around other artists.
Right.
So it's actually an interesting dynamic.
That's great. And who would be your favorite artist if you had to choose one?
I have several.
Oh,
And
okay.
if I had to break it down, I'm a big fan of Vermeer.
Beautiful.
And I love Norman Rockwell. Wyeth is another great inspiration for me. And there's a lot of up-and-coming artists now. My thing has always been the hyper-realistic style. So the
I
more
was just
realistic
gonna
I can
say
look
to
at
you,
something, right,
realism.
you can kind of see the more realistic I can make something look, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So those artists inspired me heavily because their styles were of that nature, and yeah, they've just been a big inspiration to me over the years.
Do you want to tell us about your work?
Yeah, I focus mainly on well, I do oil painting. I do oil's my go-to medium, and I do a lot of black and white graphite illustration. So all layered pencil. A lot of my peers in the industry think I'm crazy because I could just sit and just work layer over layer over layer to obtain the look I'm trying to get. But for me, it's more just getting in that zone and just going till I achieve the look I'm going for. So I would describe myself as realism, but I try to obtain that hyper-realistic style, but I kind of know my limitations. There's just a certain level you hit, and you may not be able to get where you're visualizing. But
And I'm
that's
sure you
fine
keep
with me.
pushing
And I
yourself
keep pushing
to get
myself
there.
to do it. And it's
Yeah.
another thing for artists that are on their way up in the industry is you're always learning. You never know it all. As artists, we're constantly learning, we're constantly growing.
Sure.
And in the age of technology, one of the things I find fascinating is that a lot of my students, these kids are tethered to electronics, and their whole existence is based on technology. They still carry around sketchbooks, and they'll come to me with their sketchbooks and they'll show me what they've done. And I find that's it's a beautiful thing because
It's moving.
yeah, because
It
you
really
don't,
is.
it's a lost art in some sense, but yourself, we have a large art community in this area, so there's hope.
All right. Well, Steve, thanks for joining us on Art Talk.
My pleasure.
Will you come back again and visit us?
I'd love to.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with our next guest.
A community is often defined by its access to the arts, by its presence or by its absence. The Valley Arts Council represents the 7 municipalities that make up the lower Naugatuck Valley region. It was formed for the purpose of creating and promoting a connecting thread between those among us who are artists and those who have an interest in experiencing the arts. Sometimes the only difference between a life full of art and a life void of art is simply its accessibility. Our mission is to ensure that the contribution that the arts make to one's life is recognized, valued, and realized.
Welcome to Art Talk. I'm here today with Tommy Howell, one of my best friends and also a very versatile artist. And he is a painter with oil on canvas and also a sculptor in polymer clay mostly. So how you doing today, Tommy?
I'm doing fine. I'm not sure they thought this through all that well, but
Why do you say that?
well, just, I tend to be an agent of chaos and mayhem.
Well, welcome to our set.
Thank you.
Some of you might remember Tommy from the third episode when I was the guest, because Tommy made a little sculpture of Floatin' Fred, our first host. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that, the process of making your caricatures?
Well, and I sculpt in polymer clay, and so the process is really start off with the basic figure, and then you kind of customize it and move things around, and it's all basic shapes, and you try to make it. It's much easier to do a caricature than to do like a super realistic likeness. So what happened was that we were all sitting around a coffee shop with Steve and everybody, and I said, well, we should make a Floatin' Fred action figure. And so we got right on it. About a week later, we presented it because we're up against that Art Talk deadline.
Yep. There are some other characters that you've made.
Well, people around town would probably recognize Daniel Greenwolf. I did one of him, and a couple other folks around, and then some more like nationally famous people. So.
Mm-hmm. In addition to the caricature work, I noticed that you do a lot of work that's inspired by fantasy and sci-fi.
Yeah, more horror. That's what really sort of has motivated me since I was a kid. Is I've always liked the creepy stuff and gore. Like I said, chaos and mayhem.
That's where you get a lot of your ideas.
Yeah.
I'm particularly impressed with your bird woman, the one that you made that had the whole backstory to it.
Right.
Can you tell us about how she came about?
Well, basically what happens is I start something, and then it sort of starts to tell me what it's going to be. And I started to do a sculpture just of a generic woman, and then the features just sort of led me, I'm going to put a beak on her. I mean, it's kind of that sort of spontaneous. You say, okay, this is going to take a completely different tack. And so then it started to add feathers and try to sculpt an armor to look like leather, and hands that look like claws. And what I got the idea, though, for the backstory was the idea of like some anthropologists or archaeologists working in Mesoamerica, and they discover these bones of this creature, and alongside it, they find different things describing it, and it sort of disappears because nobody wanted there to be an alternate anthropology. We sort of had to be the only ones, and so then the main archaeologist, he sculpted a figure of what it would have looked like, and so that's the sculpture that I presented.
So you're also a writer then?
Here and there, a little bit. I write some.
But do you like that, to combine writing with your visual artwork?
I like for things to have a story. I like for things to exist in a world deeper than just as an object. So yeah, I like to have some sort of place in the universe, or in some universe, for what I do.
And along those lines, who are some of your favorite artists, whether they be visual artists or maybe film?
Well, I mean, it sort of gets started with all the old Universal monster pictures from the 30s. And so as far as the people who are responsible for that, I really, I don't know a whole lot of the directors from back then, but like modern era people like George Romero, who did basically the father of the modern zombies that are all the rage now.
You've been into the modern zombies longer than the modern zombies have been really part of the pop culture.
That is probably the case. But So in film, it's basically, the horror directors, especially from like the 80s and late 70s, people like John Carpenter and Tobe Hooper, people like that. As far as other things go, in music, I'd have to say people like Alice Cooper, because it sort of combines horror and
Sure.
music. So
Very theatrical.
yeah.
So in a completely different type of style, we have one of your paintings right here. And this is an oil painting, and it's a place that's close to my heart. Can you tell us a little about this painting here?
Well, this painting in particular is a place called Chalk Pond, and it's a place that your father used to take you when you were a kid, and your entire family went. And it was a sort of an iconic thing in your life, and so I had to include some things. He always tells stories about the Chalk Pond monster, and so I had to put that in there.
With that ooby gooby.
Yeah. Now, as far as a painting goes in general, with the painting, it's more just, it's like a relaxing thing. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not trying to make any statements. It's just, and that's why there's such a difference. I mean, that's why, I'm not painting things that are, blood splashed across the canvas, or,
Have you done
gore
that?
and guts. No, I actually haven't. I've never
Really?
really painted anything like that. The painting has always been landscapes and the like, and it's all because of the initial influence of being Bob Ross, and people know about Bob Ross and
Absolutely.
Happy Little Trees and whatnot. So that was a big influence in my painting, and I started it way back when I was still in high school, looking at the Bob Ross programs, and I watched him for a long time before I ever picked up a brush.
Right.
Just because it was entertaining and sort of relaxing to listen to him. And then he's right. I mean, with the right tools and the right instruction, I think anybody can paint. So.
Well, I've certainly been able to make some paintings that I wasn't.
Yeah,
too
you've been doing your
ashamed
classes.
of. I'm definitely not a painter, but doing the Bob Ross method has been really satisfying. And you've been a real teacher for me for that as well.
Well, I try to do what I can to push people toward expanding their artistic horizons.
So oil is your preferred medium?
Yeah, I really don't do much. I do a little bit of watercolor, but I can't do acrylics because it dries too damn fast.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, oils.
And so let's tell everybody where we can see more of your work.
At the Main Street Gallery in Ansonia, that's part of the Valley Arts Council. I have a few things there, and that's pretty much it at the moment.
Well, thank you for joining us on Art Talk today, Tommy.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right.
The Valley Arts Council has just opened a new Main Street Gallery in downtown Ansonia. It's a place where art and artists have come together to bring you special, one-of-a-kind gifts. Stop by for a visit to see our selection of handcrafted jewelry, pottery, photography, and paintings, all of which are created by local artists.
Are you a painter, sculptor, photographer, or interested in the arts? Join us.
For more information, visit us at thevalleyartscouncil.org or stop by our gallery on Main Street in downtown Ansonia. The artwork in our gallery is constantly changing every month, so be sure to stop by often. Coming up in November, we have a photography show by a local artist and filmmaker, Rod Jovenone. The show is called Fire and Ice. It's all photographs taken during his recent visit to Iceland. You're not going to want to miss it. Rod's part of the creative team that puts Art Talk together for us every month. The short video that follows shows us what driving during a snowstorm is like in the land of fire and ice.
A community is often defined by its access to the arts, by its presence or by its absence. The Valley Arts Council represents the 7 municipalities that make up the Lower Naugatuck Valley region. It was formed for the purpose of creating and promoting a connecting thread between those among us who are artists and those who have an interest in experiencing the arts. Sometimes the only difference between a life full of art and a life void of art is simply its accessibility. Our mission is to ensure that the contribution that the arts make to one's life is recognized, valued, and realized.